if you've watched this channel or a lot of other retro gaming channels, there tends to be a pervading theme. Sometimes it's expressed directly, sometimes it's just implied. And the theme is that we are all, as retro gamers, reflecting on a time in the past, a hallowed time, a great time, a golden age in our gaming lives. But for this personal history, I wanted to talk about a golden age that I think we are still living in, and that is the age of Steam. Steam is, in my opinion, one of the most gamer-friendly platforms that there's ever been in gaming, and I think we kind of take it for granted. Again, in the retro community, we're all about physical media, so we don't tend to be nostalgic about digital delivery services, but Steam's been around for quite some time, and I think it has an interesting story and can give us some interesting lessons. So I want to go down memory lane and talk about my time with Steam, how I discovered Steam, a couple of important historical moments in the development of Steam, and perhaps awaken some nostalgia for a platform that I think we've all used, but maybe we just haven't realized how amazing it is. In 2024, if you look at some of the data, PC gaming is on the rise. I think there is a subset of players for whom gaming really happens on the PC. That wasn't always the case. It was the game console in the 80s and 90s that dominated, and PC was the exotic platform. We got our first PC in the late 80s, or maybe right in 1990. And it was very much a business machine. It had some games. Back in those days, you'd get shareware, and occasionally you could buy a game off the shelf, but the performance was pretty weak. It was difficult to play anything that you really wanted to play. I remember when Street Fighter II came out on PC, and I tried to purchase it and install it, and it just didn't work out on that weak machine. In the mid-90s, we got a Gateway 2000 computer, and if you're quite old, you remember Gateway 2000. I think it was kind of like a direct-to-consumer PC company, and it was a pretty tricked-out PC for the time. It had some kind of graphics capabilities. And on this PC, I had two games, Mortal Kombat 3 and a game called Imperialism. I recently spoke about Imperialism on an episode of the Nights On, Lights Off podcast. The Mortal Kombat 3 version, I can't remember if it was Ultimate Mortal Kombat 3 or just Mortal Kombat 3, but I did have a dedicated controller for it. And what I always would take away from that is it was a task installing a Windows game compared to the ease of today with Steam or any other launcher. I remember doing some research to figure out, okay, will these games run? And it was just starting up a game through MS-DOS was just very different. But I love those games, put a ton of time into it, and as that PC started to age, that was kind of my exit from PC gaming, because that was the only PC that the family was going to get. Of course, I got a laptop at some point to finish high school and head off to college, but they weren't capable of playing games. And I recall a friend at his graduation got like the coolest pre-built PC, or maybe he built it himself. I don't know. It might have been from like an early boutique PC builder, but it had at the time like the top of the line graphics card. I can't remember what that was, like a Voodoo card, something like that. And I remember going over to his place and seeing the games that he could install, but the installation of games was always somewhat of a challenge, always somewhat of an issue, and to a degree today you still have to worry about is my PC capable of playing this game, but that was more of an issue back then. So let's fast forward a little bit. When I was living on my own and I could finally afford to put some money into my PCs. This was back in the day of the NVIDIA graphics card before they went to this current iteration of the 10s, 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s series. There was, I think it was a GT 860 that I got, and then maybe a 980 upgrade. And so now I could finally play some PC games. And I remember going out and buying them physically, as I would any other game. Installing them wasn't so difficult at that point, but what really was difficult was dealing with the fact that I would actually have to put the CD into the computer and run these games. And I always thought back then, it exists, it lives on my PC. Why do I constantly have to use the CD as a dongle? Well, a good friend of mine came over, and he wasn't so much of a gamer, but he was an enthusiast in the PC space for other tasks, and he was also very cheap, so he introduced me to torrents. And I remember going online with IsoTorrent was the torrent repository of choice back then, and I remember finding the no CD cracks for these games, so I was able to download and play games, just digitally off of my computer with these cracks. And then, of course, I discovered that you could download the full games and, wow, even the new releases. And I was pretty responsible. I never really downloaded a new release, but I definitely looked for games that were hard to find, games that just weren't being sold, and downloading and playing those. And I felt PC gaming really opened up until now we're in the 2010 space, maybe. And I purchased another computer. I actually built my first computer from the ground up. I previously was just like doing off-the-shelf stuff and replacing the power supply and trying to Frankenstein it. And I just, at one point, just built my own computer. And then I discovered Steam. I can't quite recall what game forced me to get Steam. It may have been one of the Half-Life games, or it may just have been that I heard about Steam. And this was a revolutionary moment for me when I saw that installation didn't have to be difficult and that I could actually have the full digital experience. I didn't have to pirate a launcher. I didn't have to pirate a game anymore because it was all there and all on Steam. So in that way, I was a living, breathing example of Gabe Newell's famous quote. Gabe Newell, the CEO of Valve, who said, piracy is a customer service problem. It's a user experience problem. And once I saw that I had this tool for which I could legitimately purchase games, not have to put CDs in the tray, and they were reasonably priced, I never went back to ISO Hunt. I had something better. So I talked about, to me, there are a couple of high watermarks with Steam, some important historical moments with Steam, and that is once they started rolling out the seasonal sales. I can't discuss I can't describe how important that was. I was paying, when I went to Best Buy and stuff like that, I was paying full price for PC games. And when I saw that Steam was, wow, this is a platform where a couple times a year I was getting really significant discounts in a way that I was certainly not getting buying off the shelf. It was nothing like, if you remember Microsoft Games on Windows Live, I think that had a storefront. Pricing really wasn't that great. There were a couple other like Direct to Drive that had some sales, but Steam, everything was in Steam and everything was on sale. And then you consider the fact that console games themselves were never that deeply discounted. And it was an incredible experience where you could actually get a game for 99 cents or $2.99, $3.99 as a grad student. That was incredible. As just kind of like a young homeowner, just a person starting out, where I had to be conscious about money and still do have to be conscious about money, but certainly back then as a young guy, wow, I could actually, for $20, pick up a quote-unquote stack of games, certainly a digital stack of games a couple times a year and really have a good time with it. I often thought that it replicated an experience that I had as a very young kid. When in my town, we had this kind of mom and pop video store, local video store, and I remember their rentals of NES games being pretty cheap. Like even as a kid, I could go in there on a weekend and maybe I had some allowance, maybe I combined my allowance with what my parents gave me, or they wanted me to pick up a movie, so I'd pick up a movie and I some change, and they'd say, oh, you rent a game, and some days I would be able to come home with maybe 3 rented games, and it wasn't expensive, and then I could just explore anything, like whatever came out I could play, and I think the Steam sales were an opportunity to do that, and it's something that, like I said, I have to this day not found outside of Steam. The kind of second really important moment, I think, was when they combined the sales with the return policy. And this was, I remember thinking at the time, like that was the only problem with the sales. And that's why I would wait for the sales. I would say, well, I don't know if this is going to run. And of course I wasn't, even though I built my PC, there's always that question of, can you run it? Or I don't want to spend a ton of money on a game because if it's buggy and I can't install it, something like that. So I always felt that, okay, I would only buy during the sales, but the return policy was incredible. And the return policy basically allowed me to say, you know what, I'm gonna take a gamble on this game, and I've returned many, many games on Steam, no questions asked. And to me, it's just got me to purchase more. It did, I think, do something to the sale, like if you remember, like the early Steam sales, they'd have the daily deals. There'd be like 3 or so daily deals where the games would be really, really cheap, and you'd always check back. And I think with the return policy, they basically stopped that because then people were, if they bought that game prior to the daily deal, they would just return it and buy it again. So it made the sales somewhat less exciting, but over the years, I really went crazy on those sales and picked up a lot of games. So how many games did I actually pick up? How much money did I actually spend? Well, if you're familiar with the site called SteamDB, you can actually see the damage done over the years. And as you can see here, my account value is almost $3,000 if you talk about the lowest prices, and $8,000 with today's prices. 400, actually I've played 422 out of the 535 games that I own, and those are all Steam sale pickups. And outside the amount of money that I've spent being kind of scary, if you look at the hours on record, 1,428 hours, what does that equate to? That's about 60 days. So I've spent 2 months of my life playing Steam games. I think it speaks to how good the platform is, but it's kind of scary. And then Steam database gives you some other stuff here. You can see kind of like the breakdown of hours, the breakdown of games in certain price categories, and I think that bulk of the games, 223 in that $11 to $40 range, 133 in that $6 to $11 range, and you can see 73 from $2 to $6. And I would say those 2 lower amounts, I mean, those were early Steam sale days. So I think a third important historical moment was the release of the Steam Deck. Now, Steam dabbled in hardware before. If you remember, they had the Steam Link, which was a game streamer, and it didn't come with, but it was released alongside of the Steam controller with the touchpads. I had both of these things. They also had the Steam machine, which was not too successful. I had the Alienware version of the Steam machine, so basically like a set-top box looking PC. It wasn't branded as a Steam machine, but they had sort of a partnership, I think, with Alienware, and this was one of the PCs that they kind of rolled out and said, hey, you could use big picture mode, and it would kind of be Steam under your television. Again, not super successful. And then, as I said, the Steam Deck, though, was, I think, the moment when you took this incredible ecosystem that Steam had built. It wasn't just the games, it wasn't just the pricing, but the social aspects. You can stream on Steam. You have, I think, a pretty robust friends interface. You can do the multiplayer in that, within that system. So it took all of that and it put it in a piece of hardware that was really compelling. And the Steam Deck was interesting for me in a lot of ways. I got one of I think pre-ordered it. It was one of the early adopters of the Steam Deck, and thought it was absolutely awesome to see a synergy of Steam as a service and then what they could do with the hardware. And I remember thinking, do I get the Steam Deck? Do I go with the Rogue Ally, or do I pick up a Rogue Ally? Wasn't out at the same time as the Steam Deck, but sort of shortly thereafter. And what really impressed me was the hardware. If you go back and you look at those original reviews, and then you look at the reviews for the Steam Deck OLED version, this machine, its particular balance of hardware and kind of bespoke software and operating system, was able to deliver a user experience that in some cases exceeded what the more powerful handheld Windows PC consoles could do. And so when I was considering upgrading, and I was like, do I go with the Windows one? Do I stick with the Steam Deck OLED? And I went with the Steam Deck OLED. I sold my original Steam Deck, went with the OLED, and never really looked back. And just the compatibility, it seems to have more compatible games, and even games where it claims it's not compatible will often work. Your ability to use it as a Linux desktop, it was just a very forward-thinking piece of hardware. And in using it, I actually boosted my appreciation for Steam. I was like, wow, to have the Steam world in my hands, maybe go back to the PC version of Steam, where I can play all of these games in the highest quality settings possible, but also to play your PC library in bed with solid frame rates is just a really, really wonderful experience. And that's what I really appreciate about Steam. It's utter versatility. It can be a gaming platform where you can play the indie games, where you can play remakes and compilations. It's a platform where you can play the latest and greatest games if you have the hardware. It's a retro platform in the sense that Steam's been out for a long time. There are a lot of games on Steam. You can actually play through different years of games. Go back to 2014, play the games that came out in that year. Go back to 2015. It can be anything that you want it to be. And I'm also excluding the Index, the VR experience, which I've never used because VR has always made me a little queasy and nauseous. I just never really got into it. But it can give you that experience as well. And so today, I still get excited about Steam. I remember maybe 8 years ago or something like that, celebrating Christmas with my parents, and they didn't know what to get me. Okay, you're an adult. Can we get you something that you would like something that would bring you back to your childhood? And I said, well, I'm not really sure. They said, well, how about a gift card? And I said, oh, well, how about you know what? I think there's a Steam gift card. Get me a Steam gift card. So for 8 years now, and every Christmas, I get a $50 Steam gift card, and it's just this wonderful Christmas experience because it takes me back to when my parents would buy me video games for Christmas, but the Steam sale's going on, and what I always do, I get the gift card. We celebrate, we do presents on Christmas Eve, and then before I go to back to their house for Christmas Day, I wake up in the morning, have a cup of coffee, I take out my gift cards, and I just go through Steam and searching for the games that I want to play that I don't have. So it's kind of become the Christmas tradition. And then I've talked about how, in addition to that, it's also become a collecting tool for the Switch. About a year ago, maybe, I did a kind of an overview of my Switch collection, and I talked about how, why do I have so many unopened Switch games? Well, I will buy the physical release of a game, and then I will buy the Steam release, particularly when it's on sale, and I kind of see that as an extension. So I have an unopened version of the game on Switch in physical form, and then I'm playing the sort of cheap digital version that I'm getting on Steam. And ever since they released the Steam Deck, it really works beautifully for that purpose. So why doesn't Steam get the love that it deserves? Well, we don't really own the games on Steam. Like any other digital platform, we don't have the rights to this media. If Steam goes away, I know that there was talk where they said, this was maybe 10 years ago, if we ever go out of business, we'll just kind of unlock all the games and they'll be yours. Who knows if that's the case? But yeah, it's not really what we as retro gamers and collectors of physical media want. But I still think it's special because, to me, it is the last consumer-oriented video game company. And I know that might be a misnomer. I mean, are companies really, do they really take the interests of consumers at heart? Do they really care? Do they see them as anything other than little ATMs that they can wring cash out of? I get it. A lot of companies are not our friends. However, I think within the sphere of gaming, Steam has always been positive. Like, I can't really think of a moment where Steam has done something horrifically anti-consumer. Yes, they'll sometimes force you to agree to certain terms and conditions where you agree to, I think most recently it was an arbitration condition, and you couldn't use your Steam library unless you agreed to it. A pretty underhanded tactic. But they, to my knowledge, haven't had a point, like a moment where they've done something that really upsets gamers as a fan base. They still have the sales. They still become a way to enjoy games, or they still are a way to enjoy games cheaply, and it becomes a way to sort of transport your games from PC to PC. You just install Steam, there's your library, you can take it with you on the go. So I think that's a rarity these days. Now, I realize, by the way, that they're apparently terrible if you're a developer. They take a big cut and things like that. But I'm speaking in relative terms. And the fact that you can get digital media cheaply, and you have a platform that allows you to game in again, such a variety of ways, I think is special. And as I look at my life as a gamer, Steam has played such an important role, and I've spent so much time within the Steam ecosystem that it has actually become nostalgic in the same way that the Super Nintendo, the Genesis, are nostalgic to me.